I'm joined here in the studio by Paul Musgrave, who's an associate professor of government at Georgetown University in Qatar and focuses on US foreign policy. Paul, there's a lot going on and also in areas that we haven't potentially touched previously. Let's start with the Caspian Sea, because the Ukrainians have shown their ability to execute this long-range strike, a drone strike, against an Iranian vessel, one person killed, another injured. The Ukrainians say that this was essentially a military supply chain vessel going between Iran and Russia. How dramatically does this potentially expand the zone of conflict at the moment, pulling Tehran's northern lifeline with Russia into the US southern blockade?
Well, I'm reminded of the opening credits for a Master and Commander. Oceans are now battlefields. Who would have thought 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that the Caspian Sea would become a front in what looks like a multi-pronged confrontation between Ukraine, Russia, Iran? Iran and Russia have had long military cooperation. Iran's Shahed drones, which in Russia are called the Iran drones, those are plans that have been shared, technology that's been shared. Ukraine claims that this was a legitimate military target. There are other indications, of course, that Washington, the West, and Ukraine have stepped up their coordination, which has raised some eyebrows and some questions about whether this act was coordinated. We've seen the U.S. grant licenses to manufacture Patriot missiles. We've seen increased economic pressure on Russia. Of course, Congress is also considering some more sanctions. But we do see in and around Iran, and now, of course, in and around the Arabian Gulf, increased pressure on shipping, increased look at choke points, and if the Caspian Sea, which for Iran is a very important northern economic lifeline, as we just heard, if this also comes into play, then that's something that is going to widen the scope of this. We're also now in what some analysts call the third missile age, and Iran and Ukraine, 10 years ago, not on most people's list of significant military powers, now able to exercise regional influence even in the middle of these really trying circumstances. I think that's a development in itself.
So if Ukraine isn't potentially acting purely on its own initiative here and is perhaps working in sympathy with the United States, what might be the underlying motives for Ukraine right now? Because it's simply a little bit more than blocking the supply of Iranian weapons to the theater of conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Right. I mean, all of this could be, we're speculating a little bit here because it's very hard to know. On the other hand, you might imagine that there's greater coordination. Of course, Russia, according to reporting, has been helping supply Iran with targeting coordinates for its own campaign. And you can imagine that the natural alignment of interests against Moscow and Tehran would bring seemingly unaffiliated actors into this conflict. But the fact that Ukraine has these capabilities, the fact that Ukraine is able to wield these, may offer it additional leverage that it didn't have a couple of years ago. And certainly whatever else happens, whatever else the specific circumstances of this strike, I think that everybody involved is going to have to start looking at the geography of this broader conflict in a much different way, because now there's potentially a much different and more fearsome threat to shipping everywhere.
Whatever Ukraine decides to do in the Caspian needs to be extremely well calibrated. We've just heard from Russell Serdar, our correspondent in Tehran, saying that Kyiv might be in Iran's crosshairs. It's less than 2,000 kilometers away from Iran. It's well in range. I mean, how might that complicate things?
Well, if you look at maps of who is in range of Iranian missiles, it's a lot of folks, all of Turkey, all of Pakistan, of course, reaching into Europe. I think that for Iran, any response here is going to have to be calibrated on a few dimensions. First is, do they want to add another target to the wars that they are already fighting? Iran's military capabilities are stressed here. They have a finite number of missiles. The United States and Israel have gone after their ability to reconstitute their missile programs. Then there's also the fact that if Iran were to start launching missiles into Europe, I think that folks in Europe themselves might actually begin to listen to some of the things that the Trump administration, which of course began this aspect of the conflict, has been saying about Europe's vulnerability to and interest in this conflict. I'm not sure that Iran would want to rush into that headlong.
Very, very lastly, Paul, just to explain to our international audience the significance of the Caspian Sea area, because viewers may wonder why the US doesn't have a naval presence there, for instance, or why NATO intelligence isn't perhaps as widespread in that particular part of the world. Give us an understanding of the powers at play, the factors that we need to take into consideration when we understand exactly what's happening north of Iran.
Well, the Caspian Sea, it's landlocked. It is an internal sea. It is bordered by countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union. It's not something where NATO or the West really had a lot of visibility. After the end of the Cold War, energy interests and others got involved there, but it has long been a Russian and local and Iranian lake. What's changed now, of course, is that we're starting to see Ukrainians who have greater familiarity with this area, who have the ability to talk to folks who are around the littoral of this area, folks who have their own reasons to distrust Russia. We're seeing this conflict extend. That also, of course, jeopardizes, say, how Kazakhstan and other Caspian energy exports might come to market. We are looking at global energy markets being drawn in, and that's going to draw in everywhere where there's global energy supplies.
So the Caspian becomes the next zone of conflict. Oil supplies could be further impacted. Supplies coming, as you say, from the likes of Kazakhstan and other parts of Central Asia. Paul, good to hear your thoughts and analysis. Many thanks for that. Paul Musgrave, Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar.